On Christmas Day, my daughter left me waiting at the airport for 3 hours and ignored 15 missed calls. Meanwhile, she went to pick up her father-in-law and bought him a $4,000 watch. Perhaps out of guilt, she gave me what she called a more sentimental gift, a $65 tie. I smiled at her warmly in return. But soon I would show my daughter the true value of what she had thrown away. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The humid Miami air, thick with the scent of jet fuel and distant ocean, hit me the moment I stepped off the jet bridge. It was 12:20 p.m. on Christmas Day, and the weight of the gift bags, 6 in total, cut into my fingers as I navigated the bustling terminal of Miami International Airport. I shifted them, adjusting my grip, trying to ignore the slight ache already forming in my palms. This was it. Christmas with Rebecca, Scott, and Sophie. A fresh start. Around me, the terminal buzzed with an almost palpable festive energy. Families embraced, children squealed with delight, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. Couples kissed under plastic mistletoe hanging haphazardly from departure signs. I watched a grandmother, her face crinkled with joy, pull a small boy into a tight hug. I saw a father hoist a giggling toddler onto his shoulders, the child's tiny hands reaching for the twinkling lights of a nearby Christmas tree. My chest tightened with a familiar warmth, a hopeful anticipation that had been building for weeks. Soon, that would be me with Sophie. I'd offered to come early to help prepare the holiday meal. It was a gesture born of love and perhaps a quiet desire to feel needed again. My European restaurant in Boston, Helen's Table, had been my life for 30 years. A small, intimate place known for its authentic Italian cuisine and the warmth that Helen, my late wife, had infused into every corner. It was the cornerstone of my life's work, a testament to decades of careful business and shrewd investments that had quietly built substantial wealth. After she passed, the silence in the kitchen, the absence of her laugh echoing from the office, had become unbearable. I thought of the gifts I carried. For Rebecca, the heirloom emerald earrings, Helen's favorite piece, saved specifically for this moment. Helen had worn them to our wedding, a deep green against her white gown, a symbol of enduring love, just as Helen's mother had worn them to hers. Now they would go to our daughter, connecting her to 3 generations of strong Whitmore women. For little Sophie, the American Girl doll she'd mentioned during our last video call, her eyes wide with longing. And for Scott, a cashmere scarf, a subtle nod to the quality and comfort I hoped my son-in-law appreciated. But the real gifts, the ones that truly represented my love and continued support, weren't in the colorful bags. Tucked safely in my inner coat pocket were 3 crisp envelopes from Bank of America, each sealed with the kind of weight that meant serious business. Inside Rebecca's envelope, a certified check for $50,000. Scott's contained the same amount. The third envelope, marked Sophie's Future, held $95,000 designated for my granddaughter's education. A total of $195,000. This Christmas morning generosity was carefully planned, stemming from the $470,000 sale of Helen's Table after my wife passed. Selling the restaurant had been the hardest decision, but it gave me the means to show my family how much they meant to me. This money, substantial enough to make a real difference yet not so excessive as to create dependency, could help Rebecca and Scott stop worrying about household expenses or finally take that European vacation they'd mentioned. And Sophie's future secured. Helen would have approved. She had, in fact, given me the idea for Sophie's fund in one of our last conversations. Promise me you'll make sure Sophie and any other grandchildren get proper educations. College keeps getting more expensive, she'd whispered, and I'd held her hand and promised. I pulled out my phone and dialed Rebecca's number. It rang twice before her voice came through, flat and distracted. Dad? Rebecca, sweetheart, it's me. I'm here, just landed. The flight was smooth, no delays at all. I tried to inject as much warmth and cheer into my voice as possible, hoping it would be reciprocated. Oh, right. Dad, we're running a bit late. Wait for us at the exit. We'll be there soon. Something in her tone made me pause. No excitement, no warmth, just obligation. It was a subtle shift, but it pricked at me. Is everything all right? You sound... Everything's fine. We're just dealing with some last-minute Christmas chaos, you know how it is. Her voice was dismissive, already moving on. I didn't know how it was. Helen and I had always been ready early for family arrivals. We'd circle the airport pickup lane 3 times rather than make someone wait. We'd stand at the gate waving furiously, our faces beaming. But then Helen had always been the one to manage the chaos, making it seem effortless. Should I grab the bags and head to baggage claim, or do you want me to? Dad, I really have to go. Just wait at the exit doors. We'll figure it out when we get there. The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a moment, the screen still displaying Rebecca's contact photo. A smiling selfie of her and Sophie from last summer. Around me, families continued their joyful reunions. The baggage carousel clanked to life, a low mechanical groan. I collected my largest suitcase and wheeled everything toward the exit doors. The gift bags swayed against my legs with each step, their festive colors a stark contrast to the growing dullness in my chest. Outside, the Miami sun was bright, almost blinding, and the air was warm, humid. I found a spot near the automatic doors where families typically gathered, a small cluster of benches. Other travelers streamed past me toward waiting cars, their faces alight with the joy of arrival and reunion. I checked my watch. 1:05 p.m. Barely 45 minutes since I landed, but already a sense of unease had settled over me. A young father hurried past, carrying a car seat with one hand and pulling a suitcase with the other. His wife followed, chatting excitedly about Christmas dinner plans, their voices fading as they disappeared into the parking structure. I watched them, a pang of something akin to envy twisting in my gut. That should be me. That was me once, with Helen and a much younger Rebecca. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. Still running late, be patient. Be patient, not sorry or will hurry or can't wait to see you, just be patient. I arranged my gift bags around my feet like colorful sentries protecting a fortress of diminishing hope. The emerald earrings box sat on top of Rebecca's pile. Another family walked past. The teenage daughter rolled her eyes at something her mother said, but she was smiling. Really smiling. The kind of smile that said she was exactly where she wanted to be, with the people she wanted to be with. I pulled up Rebecca's contact again. My thumb hovered over her name. Maybe I should call Scott instead. Scott always answered quickly, always seemed more grounded, but something held me back. Rebecca had said they were dealing with Christmas chaos. Maybe I was overthinking this. Maybe I was being too sensitive. The automatic doors whooshed open and closed as travelers came and went. Each time I looked up, hopefully. Each time strangers passed by without a glance. 1:15 p.m. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other. The initial excitement had transformed into something uncomfortable, like wearing a sweater that had shrunk in the wash. It still fit, but nothing felt quite right. A security guard walked by, nodding politely. I nodded back, a forced smile on my lips, and checked my phone again. No new messages, no missed calls, just the lock screen photo I'd taken of Sophie last Christmas. Her gap-toothed grin bright under our old, slightly crooked Christmas tree in Boston. This Christmas tree would be different. Rebecca had sent photos of their new Miami house, all white and silver decorations, perfectly coordinated, professional looking. Nothing like the chaotic homemade ornament explosion Helen and I had always preferred. But that was fine. People changed, grew up, developed their own traditions. I just wished Rebecca had sounded happier to hear from me. The sun outside was still bright, but a few clouds were beginning to gather on the horizon. December in Miami. I'd forgotten how quickly the weather could shift. My watch showed 1:20 p.m. now. Still, traffic could be terrible on Christmas Day, even in Miami. I pulled my light jacket tighter despite the humidity and settled in to wait. Moving away from the main flow of travelers, I spotted a row of cushioned chairs near the large windows overlooking the tarmac. Perfect. I wheeled my suitcase over and carefully arranged the gift bags around my feet. Settling deeper into the cushioned chair, I adjusted the gift bags so the ribbons wouldn't get crushed and leaned back to watch the steady stream of families reuniting near the exit doors. Each embrace reminded me why this wait was worthwhile. The checks in my pocket represented more than money. They were proof of a father's love, carefully planned and precisely executed. When Rebecca discovered the certified check, her eyes would widen the same way they had when she was 7, and found the bicycle she'd been hoping for under our Christmas tree. When Scott realized his father-in-law had thought to include him, his respect for me would deepen. And when I explained the education fund, they'd both understand that I wasn't just thinking about today. I was investing in their children's futures worth every minute of waiting. By 2:30 p.m., the cushioned chair near the large windows had become profoundly uncomfortable. My back ached from sitting in the same position, and the gift bags seemed heavier each time I adjusted them. The airport entrance doors swooshed open and closed with mechanical precision, bringing blasts of humid Miami air that, for all its warmth, couldn't shake the chill that had settled deep in my bones. I checked my watch again. 2:47 p.m., 2.5 hours since landing. Time to find somewhere less exposed. Gathering my belongings required strategic planning now. Suitcase handle in my right hand, 3 gift bags looped over my left arm, the remaining clutch in my left fist. I shuffled toward the main terminal, away from those treacherous entrance doors. The coffee shop near gate B15 with its marginally more comfortable tables beckoned. I arranged my colorful fortress of gift bags around the table legs and ordered a large black coffee from a tired-looking barista who wished me Merry Christmas with practiced efficiency. "You too," I mumbled, my voice feeling raspy. 3:05 p.m. The coffee warmed my hands, but the internal chill persisted. Other travelers moved past my table with purpose. Families heading to gates, couples embracing after successful pickups, business travelers checking phones. Everyone, it seemed, except me, knew exactly where they were going and when they'd get there. I pulled out my phone and stared at Rebecca's contact. No missed calls, no new messages since that brief, dismissive, "be patient" text hours ago. Traffic couldn't be this terrible, not for 3 hours. Not even on Christmas Day in Miami. I dialed her number again. It rang twice, then went straight to voicemail. I tried Scott's phone. Voicemail. A few more times, alternating between them. Still nothing. Unanswered. Ignored. Just silence stretching across agonizing hours of Christmas Day. By 3:30 p.m., hunger gnawed at my stomach. I purchased an overpriced sandwich from the coffee shop and ate mechanically, my gaze fixed on the entrance area through the windows. Each time a family approached, my pulse quickened. Each time strangers walked past, disappointment settled deeper. 3:45 p.m. Dinner time on Christmas Day. Families across the country were gathering around tables, sharing stories, opening presents. I was sitting alone in an airport coffee shop, guarding gift bags like a department store Santa who'd lost his way. The rational part of my mind offered explanations. Holiday traffic, last-minute Christmas preparations. Maybe Sophie had gotten sick and they'd needed to find a babysitter. Rebecca had always been a little dramatic about minor inconveniences. But the nagging voice in the back of my head whispered different possibilities. Deliberate. The word floated into my consciousness, unwelcome and chilling. No, Rebecca might be selfish and ungrateful at times, but she wouldn't be cruel, not this cruel. Yet what if something had happened? What if they were in a hospital, injured, unable to call? What if Sophie was sick and they were too focused on caring for her to answer? I looked at my phone's lock screen photo of Sophie from last Christmas. Her gap-toothed grin bright under our old, slightly crooked Christmas tree in Boston. That image, so full of genuine, unadulterated joy, contrasted sharply with the sleek, professionally decorated home Rebecca had shown me photos of. All white and silver, perfectly coordinated. Nothing like the chaotic homemade ornament explosion Helen and I had always preferred. It was a small detail, but it felt significant now. A shift, a deliberate move away from the warmth of the past. My mind drifted to Helen's table, my old European restaurant in Boston. I pictured the familiar faces of my regular customers, the way they'd linger over their pasta, the easy laughter that filled the dining room. I remembered Maria, my head chef, who'd worked with Helen for years, and old Mr. Henderson, who came in every Tuesday for the lasagna. Their genuine warmth, even as customers, felt like a stark contrast to this cold silence from my own flesh and blood. They would have called. They would have cared. The coffee shop began closing down around me, chairs stacked on tables, the barista wiping counters with obvious exhaustion. Time to move again. I relocated to a seating area near the main information desk, closer to the airport's central heating system. Though in Miami it was more about the air conditioning. My expensive leather shoes had developed uncomfortable pressure points from standing and walking with heavy bags. The emerald earrings box pressed against my ribs through my coat pocket, a sharp reminder of the love I'd brought to share. 4 p.m., exactly 3 hours since landing. This was beyond holiday traffic, beyond any reasonable delay. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Something was fundamentally wrong. I found a quiet corner near the restrooms and dialed Rebecca's number one last time, my fingers stiff from cold and exhaustion. Straight to voicemail. I tried Scott's again. Voicemail. No reasonable explanation existed for this silence, unless they were deliberately avoiding me. The thought struck like ice water in my veins, and I pushed it away immediately. No, Rebecca might be selfish and ungrateful, but she wouldn't be cruel, not this cruel, but then why? Why the silence? Why the abandonment? I gathered my gift bags with trembling hands. Time for action, time to find out what was happening. The main exit area buzzed with late-night activity. I found the ride pickup zone and quickly searched for a local taxi service. Miami Taxi Services, the dispatcher answered with practiced efficiency. I need a taxi to Rebecca Whitmore's address in Miami from Miami International Airport, I said, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. Which terminal? Main terminal, door 3 East. I recited Rebecca's address, the house I'd helped with the down payment. Another $20,000 I'd provided without question or thanks. Fare will be about $55. Taxi should be there in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. After 3 hours, 10 more minutes felt like nothing. I positioned myself near the designated pickup spot and checked my phone one more time. No missed calls, no texts, no explanations. 4:10 p.m. Christmas dinner was long over for many. Families across America were settling into evening routines, children falling asleep, surrounded by torn wrapping paper and new toys. I was standing outside an airport in the humid Miami evening, carrying gift bags worth thousands of dollars, waiting for a taxi to take me to a house where my own family might be deliberately avoiding me. The yellow cab pulled up at 4:12 p.m. Exactly. The driver, a middle-aged man named Mike with kind eyes and a neatly trimmed beard, helped me load my bags into the trunk. "Christmas visit?" he asked as I settled into the back seat. "Something like that," I replied, trying to sound casual, trying to maintain a brave front despite the cold that had settled in my chest. "Long day at the airport?" he asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. 3 hours waiting for family to pick me up, I admitted, the words feeling strange. 3 hours? Wow. Christmas travel is rough. He paused. Family reunion? Something like that. My daughter and her husband. The words felt strange in my mouth. Family reunion implied joy, anticipation, warmth. What word described this? "They must be excited to see you," he said with genuine kindness. I stared out the window at houses decorated with Christmas lights, already twinkling despite the late afternoon sun. Behind those glowing windows, I imagined families gathered, sharing stories, grandparents holding sleepy children. Normal families. "I hope so," I finally answered, though hope felt increasingly fragile. The gift bag slid slightly as he took a turn. I studied them automatically, my hands brushing against the expensive wrapping paper. Each bag represented hours of careful selection, thousands of dollars of thoughtful generosity. The emerald earrings alone were worth more than most people's monthly salary. "You from Miami originally?" Mike asked, breaking my uncomfortable reverie. "No, Boston. Built a business there. European restaurant, 30 years. "That's impressive. Family business, was it?" "Was supposed to be." The admission slipped out before I could stop it. "Daughter went to college instead, graduate school. Better opportunities than working with old dad." Mike nodded thoughtfully. "Education's important, but family business, that's special too. My son works with me part-time. Helps with dispatch." The casual way he mentioned his son, present tense, active involvement, highlighted everything missing from my relationship with Rebecca. When was the last time she'd shown interest in Helen's table? Even when I was considering the sale, her questions focused on the money, not the legacy I was ending. "Almost there," Mike announced as we turned onto Rebecca's street. "What's the house number?" I gave him the address. The house I'd helped buy in the neighborhood I'd made possible for the daughter who couldn't be bothered to return her father's calls. "Just need to make a quick stop at the supermarket first, if you don't mind," I said, a new thought forming. "Need a few last-minute ingredients for the Christmas feast." Mike pulled into the supermarket parking lot. Inside, the store was bustling with last-minute shoppers. I grabbed a small basket and headed for the spice aisle, picking up a few herbs I knew Rebecca rarely stocked. At the checkout, a young cashier, Matt, with bright, friendly eyes, scanned my items. "Getting ready for Christmas dinner?" he asked, a genuine smile on his face. "That's the plan," I replied, a faint smile touching my lips. "Merry Christmas," he said as he handed me my receipt. "You too, Matt." The simple, authentic kindness from Mike and Matt highlighted the bitter irony of finding more human connection and warmth from strangers than from my own daughter on Christmas Day. The contrast was stark, a cold, hard truth settling in my chest. The taxi pulled into the driveway of Rebecca's modern house in Miami at around 4:25 p.m. The sun, though still bright, was beginning its slow descent, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn. My eyes scanned the driveway, hoping to see Rebecca's sleek SUV or Scott's sedan. Nothing. Only the empty expanse of polished concrete. A fresh wave of disappointment washed over me, colder than the airport's air conditioning. Mike, the kind taxi driver, helped me unload my bags from the trunk, his cheerful "Merry Christmas" feeling like a distant echo. I paid him, added a generous tip, and stood for a moment on the curb, the gift bags heavy in my hands, the silence of the empty driveway pressing in. As I approached the front door, a woman in a crisp uniform, Rebecca's maid, opened it before I could even ring the bell. Her expression was polite, professional, but devoid of the warmth I'd hoped for. "Mr. Whitmore?" "Ms. Rebecca asked me to let you in. She said she'd be home later." "Later?" I echoed, the word tasting flat. "Yes, thank you." I stepped inside. The house's cool, conditioned air offered a stark contrast to the humid warmth outside. The entryway was grand, all clean lines and minimalist decor, perfectly aligned with the photos Rebecca had sent. But it felt sterile, unwelcoming. My bags, once symbols of love and generosity, now felt like cumbersome burdens. I immediately made my way to the kitchen, the heart of any home, or so I'd always believed. It was a chef's dream. Gleaming stainless steel appliances, vast marble countertops, an enormous island. Yet it was spotless, unused. The silence in the house was jarring, a stark absence of the festive chaos I'd tried to rationalize away at the airport. No excited shouts, no Christmas music, no scent of baking cookies. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant, almost imperceptible sounds of the maid moving about. I set my bags down carefully by the island, the colorful wrapping paper a splash of incongruous cheer in the pristine space. I rolled up the sleeves of my jacket, a familiar, almost automatic gesture. This was what I'd offered to do after all. Prepare the feast. I pulled out the supermarket bag Mike had waited for me to fill. Herbs, spices, a few fresh vegetables I knew Rebecca rarely bothered with. I'd envisioned us doing this together, side by side, like Helen and I used to. Helen bustling around Helen's table, her apron dusted with flour, the air thick with the aroma of garlic and simmering tomatoes. She'd bring homemade cookies every Friday to the restaurant, a small gesture that spoke volumes of her warmth and care for everyone around her. That memory, so vivid and full of genuine affection, felt like a ghost in this sterile kitchen. I began to work, methodically, almost mechanically, chopping vegetables, seasoning the turkey, stirring the cranberry sauce. The rhythmic sounds of the knife on the cutting board, the sizzle of butter in a pan, the gentle bubbling of the sauce, slowly began to fill the quiet space. It was a familiar comfort, the creation of something delicious, something meant to bring people together. But as the hours stretched on, the solitude pressed in. My hands, usually so nimble and confident in a kitchen, felt tired, heavy. Each stir, each chop was accompanied by a quiet sigh. I kept checking my phone almost compulsively. Each time I hoped to see a missed call, a text message, an apology, an explanation. Anything. But the screen remained stubbornly blank. No new messages from Rebecca, no word from Scott. Their silence was deafening, a clear message of indifference, of deliberate omission. Around 6:30 p.m., the aroma of roasted turkey finally began to permeate the house, a rich, savory scent that should have signaled warmth and gathering. Instead, it merely highlighted the emptiness. I set the table in the elegant dining room, laying out Rebecca's expensive china, the crystal glasses, the polished silverware. I placed a small, festive centerpiece I'd picked up at the supermarket. I imagined Sophie's excitement, Scott's easy smile, Rebecca's appreciation. The vision felt distant, almost fantastical. By 7:30 p.m., the meal was mostly prepared. The turkey rested, golden and fragrant. Side dishes were warming in the oven. The house was ready. I was ready. But they weren't here. I sat down at the vast dining table, alone in the formal room, the silence amplifying the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. My stomach rumbled, but I had no appetite. The exhaustion from the long journey, the extended wait, and now the solitary preparations had settled deep into my bones. Then, just as I was about to give up hope of them arriving before the food grew cold, I heard it. The distinct sound of car tires crunching on the gravel driveway. followed by the familiar thud of car doors closing, and then voices, laughter. Not Rebecca's alone, but Scott's, and two other voices I recognized, Gerald and Karen, Scott's parents. They were here. I stood up, a jolt of mixed emotions shooting through me. Relief that they were finally home, but also a fresh wave of resentment. They were returning from picking up Gerald and Karen from Orlando, Florida, as if that explained the 3-hour airport ordeal and the complete lack of communication. The front door opened, and Rebecca's voice, bright and cheerful, filled the house. "We're home! And just in time for—" Her voice cut off abruptly as she stepped into the entryway and saw me standing there, apron still tied around my waist, the scent of roasted turkey clinging to my clothes. Her face, flushed with what looked like genuine surprise, shifted quickly to a flustered smile. "Dad, you're here! Oh my goodness, I didn't expect you so soon." Scott, following behind her with Gerald and Karen, looked equally surprised, though his expression was more of mild discomfort than genuine shock. "Alan, wow, you really made it here." Gerald, a tall, distinguished man with a kind smile, stepped forward, his eyes widening in surprise. "Alan, what a pleasant surprise. Rebecca, you didn't tell us your father had arrived." Karen, elegant and composed, looked at me with genuine concern. "Alan, dear, you must be exhausted. Did you just get in?" "I landed at 12:20 p.m., I stated, my voice calm, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. "I waited at the airport for 3 hours." Rebecca quickly interjected, her voice a little too high, a practiced flutter. "Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry. We had the most dreadful traffic coming back from Orlando. It was absolutely insane. And my phone died, and Scott's car broke down right outside the airport. It was just Christmas chaos, you know how it is." Her words tumbled out in a rush, a cascade of clumsy, familiar excuses. Scott mumbled something about technical difficulties and unavoidable delays, avoiding my gaze. Gerald and Karen exchanged a quick, uncertain glance. "Well," I said, untying my apron, "the good news is dinner is ready. I've been busy in the kitchen." I gestured towards the dining room where the table was set, the food waiting. The aroma, which had once felt so solitary, now seemed to fill the space with a strange, almost accusatory warmth. Rebecca, Scott, Gerald, and Karen looked at the table, then back at me, a mixture of surprise, relief, and a hint of something else, perhaps a touch of guilt, on their faces. The stage was set for the deceptive calm before the first cracks truly began to show. The air in the dining room, thick with the scent of roasted turkey and the forced cheer of recent arrivals, felt heavy. Rebecca, ever the hostess, quickly ushered everyone to the table. Sophie, my granddaughter, a whirlwind of bright energy, launched herself at me the moment she saw me. "Grandpa, Alan, you're here!" she shrieked, her small arms wrapping around my legs. That genuine embrace, so full of unadulterated joy, was a balm to my weary soul, a stark contrast to the distant reception I'd received from her mother. I knelt, hugging her tightly, burying my face in her soft hair. "Hello, sweet pea. Merry Christmas." Her innocent excitement was a reminder of why I was here, why I'd endured the long wait and the chilling silence. We settled around the elegant dining table. Gerald and Karen, Scott's parents, took their seats with polite smiles, their eyes occasionally flicking towards me, perhaps sensing an unspoken tension. Rebecca, bustling with a nervous energy, directed Sophie to her chair, then gestured for me to sit beside her. Scott, meanwhile, seemed intent on avoiding my gaze, busying himself with pouring water. Just as we were about to begin, Rebecca leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, a practiced sweetness coating her words. "Dad," she said, pulling a small flat box wrapped in cheap, shiny paper from behind her back. "I have something for you." She pushed it across the table towards me, her smile wide, almost too bright. "It's just a little something, but I saw it and thought of you." I took the box. It was light, almost insubstantial, a stark contrast to the carefully weighted emerald earrings I had for her. I unwrapped it slowly, the cheap paper tearing easily. Inside, nestled on a bed of tissue, was a bright red tie. $65, maybe $70 at most. It felt perfunctory, a last-minute thought. "Oh, Rebecca, thank you, sweetheart. It's very thoughtful." I forced a smile, trying to ignore the bitter taste in my mouth. Her sweet words momentarily softened the fatigue and disappointment that had been my constant companions all day. For a fleeting moment, a tiny flicker of hope ignited. Perhaps this was her way of making amends. "It'll look great on you, Dad," she chirped, then turned her attention to Sophie, asking about her day. The moment of false reconciliation was over as quickly as it began. Dinner commenced, a delicate dance of polite conversation and strained smiles. I tried to engage, asking Gerald about his recent golf trip, Karen about her charity work. Rebecca and Scott contributed little, mostly responding in monosyllables or with vague, non-committal answers. Sophie, bless her heart, chattered away about Santa and her Christmas list, her innocent joy a beacon in the quiet tension. After the main course, before dessert, I decided it was time for my gifts. I reached for the burgundy gift bag, the one containing the emerald earrings for Rebecca. "Before we get too full," I announced, my voice steady, "I brought a few things from Boston." Rebecca's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of genuine curiosity, perhaps even greed, crossing her face. I pulled out the small velvet box and handed it to her. "For you, Rebecca. Your grandmother Helen's emerald earrings. They were her favorite." Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened the box. The deep green stones gleamed under the dining room lights. "Dad! Oh my goodness! These are exquisite." "Thank you, Dad. They're beautiful." Her voice held a note of genuine surprise, but it was quickly replaced by a practiced, almost dismissive politeness. She held them up for Scott to see, then quickly placed them back in the box, setting it carefully beside her plate. No immediate attempt to try them on, no effusive joy. Just a quiet, almost reserved acceptance. Next, I handed Sophie her red and gold bag. Her eyes lit up as she tore open the paper to reveal the American Girl doll. "She's beautiful, Grandpa." "Thank you, thank you, thank you." She hugged the doll tightly, her face buried in its synthetic hair, then looked up at me with that gap-toothed grin, a pure, unadulterated expression of happiness. That was the reaction I had hoped for, the one that made every sacrifice feel worthwhile. Finally, I presented Scott with the forest green bag containing the cashmere scarf. "For you, Scott. Thought it might keep you warm on those cooler Miami evenings." Scott took it, a faint smile on his face. "Thanks, Alan. Nice scarf. Very soft." He gave it a perfunctory squeeze, then set it down beside his plate, much like Rebecca had done with the earrings. It was Gerald who broke the quiet. He cleared his throat, a warm smile on his face. "Alan," he began, his voice resonating with genuine admiration. "What a pleasant surprise. Rebecca, you didn't tell us your father had arrived." The words hit me like a physical blow. The genuine surprise in Gerald's voice was unmistakable. My mind reeled. While I was sitting for 3 agonizing hours at Miami International Airport, calling her, waiting for a pickup that never came, Rebecca was driving to Orlando to pick up her in-laws and buying them expensive gifts. The $65 tie she'd given me felt like a slap in the face. The emerald earrings, a symbol of my enduring love and Helen's legacy, felt cheapened, almost mocked by her blatant disregard. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. My jaw tightened, but I forced my facial muscles to remain neutral. I would not Could not humiliate her in front of everyone, not yet. My gaze flickered to Rebecca. Her face was a mask of practiced composure, but I saw a faint flush creep up her neck, a telltale sign of discomfort. Scott beside her shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his eyes fixed on his plate. They knew. They knew I knew. Or at least they knew they'd been caught in a lie. "Oh, Dad, you know," Rebecca interjected quickly, her voice a little too bright, a practiced flutter. "It was just a quick trip. We wanted to make sure Gerald and Karen got here safely, especially with the holiday traffic." She glanced at Scott, who offered a weak nod. "Of course," I said, my voice calm, almost unnervingly so. "Family is important." The words, simple and true, hung in the air, weighted with a meaning only I fully understood. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of polite conversation, but for me, it was a battle to maintain my composure. Each forced smile, each casual remark felt like a betrayal. The food, which I had so meticulously prepared, tasted like ash in my mouth. The festive atmosphere of the house, which I had hoped to share, now felt like a carefully constructed facade designed to hide a chilling truth. My suspicion, which had been a nagging whisper, had now solidified into a cold, hard certainty. The cracks were showing, and I knew with a dreadful clarity that they were only going to get wider. The dinner had concluded, a charade of polite smiles and strained conversation. I excused myself, feigning a need for more cranberry sauce, and headed towards the kitchen. The air there, still warm from the oven, carried the lingering scent of my meticulously prepared feast. As I reached for the bowl, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Rebecca. "Dad," she began, her voice a little too bright, a little too casual. She moved to the sink, picking up a wine glass and polishing it with a dish towel, carefully avoiding my gaze. "About earlier, with Gerald." I waited, my hand still on the cranberry sauce bowl. "That watch," she continued, her words tumbling out in a nervous rush. "It was Scott's idea, really. He insisted. And you know how Gerald is, he just blurts things out. We were going to tell you later, of course." She laughed, a short, brittle sound. "And your gift, the tie. I know it wasn't much, but I promise I'll make it up to you. A better gift soon, I swear." I turned, looking at her, really looking at her. Her eyes darted away, unable to meet mine. The practiced sweetness was still there, but it was thinner now, almost transparent. "It's all right, Rebecca," I said softly, the words carrying a hidden layer of pain and disappointment that I hoped she wouldn't miss. "I can buy what I need myself." I patted her head, a gesture I hadn't made since she was a little girl, and walked past her. I needed a moment, a quiet space to collect myself. The restroom seemed like the only sanctuary. As I walked down the dimly lit corridor, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet I'd helped Rebecca and Scott afford when they bought this house, I noticed the bathroom door was slightly ajar. I reached for the handle, but then voices from the kitchen stopped me cold. Rebecca and Scott, speaking in hushed tones, thinking they were alone. "I really wish he hadn't shown up tonight," Scott said, his voice carrying the exasperation he'd hidden all evening. My hand froze on the bathroom door handle. The words hit me like physical blows, each one landing with chilling precision. "He always embarrasses us in front of your parents," Rebecca replied, her tone casual, dismissive. "Those silly stories about his restaurant, about building it from nothing like he's some kind of mogul." Silly stories? My mind reeled. I'd built Helen's Table from a $5,000 loan into a thriving restaurant, expanded it to multiple locations over 30 years. It wasn't just a business. It was the foundation of everything I'd built, carefully diversified and grown year after year, generating substantial wealth. 12-hour days, 16-hour days, Missed vacations, sacrificed comforts, all so Rebecca could have every opportunity I'd never had. So she could go to the best schools, study abroad in Italy, have the life she deserved. And now it was silly stories. Your dad just doesn't understand how to behave around people like Gerald and Karen, Scott continued, his voice laced with disdain. The way he talks, his mannerisms, it's awkward. People like Gerald and Karen, people who had always treated me with respect and warmth, people who had listened with genuine interest to my stories about customer service philosophy, about the challenges of running a business. They had praised my thoughtfulness, my gifts, and now I was awkward. I was hoping if we ignored him long enough today, he'd just go back home, Rebecca said. I heard the clink of dishes being loaded into a dishwasher, a mundane sound accompanying such cruel words. Maybe get the hint that we don't really want him here. 3 hours. 3 hours of deliberate cruelty designed to make me leave. My legs felt weak. I gripped the doorframe for support, forcing myself to keep listening, even as the words twisted a knife in my gut. The way he goes on about his little Italian place like it's a Michelin star or something, Rebecca laughed softly. It's just embarrassing. Little Italian place? My European restaurant, Helen's Table, had been a Boston institution, a testament to decades of relentless hard work, passion, and sacrifice. The memory of Helen, bringing homemade pasta every Friday for the staff, her genuine warmth and pride in our shared dream, flashed before my eyes. That warmth, that genuine connection stood in stark contrast to the cold calculation I was hearing now. Maybe next Christmas we just don't invite him at all, Scott suggested. Tell him we're going out of town or something. Perfect, Rebecca agreed readily. Your parents are so sophisticated, so educated. Dad means well, but he's just not their type. All that working-class charm might have been fine when I was younger, but now, not their type. Gerald, who'd spent 30 minutes at last year's Christmas asking thoughtful questions about European cuisine and restaurant management. Karen, who'd listened with genuine interest to my stories about customer service philosophy. My breathing became shallow, sharp, each word carved deeper into what remained of my paternal pride. At least the money situation will be settled soon, Rebecca said, her voice taking on a more practical, almost eager tone. Once the inheritance, then we won't have to pretend to care about these awkward family gatherings. The inheritance? They were waiting for me to die. I stood in that hallway, surrounded by the warmth of a house I'd helped purchase, listening to my daughter discuss my death like a business transaction. The emerald earrings in my coat pocket, 3 generations of family history, suddenly felt like a joke, an expensive joke on a foolish old man. Something inside me crystallized, hardened. The hurt father began transforming into something else entirely. A cold, clear resolve settled over me. I reached into my coat and felt the sealed envelopes containing $195,000. Money I'd planned to give freely, joyfully out of love. Money I'd earned through decades of tireless work, building a legacy. Now it would serve a different purpose, a purpose they would never see coming. I straightened my shoulders and touched my wallet, feeling the outline of the checks inside. Rebecca wanted my money. She could have it, but she was going to earn every devastating penny. My footsteps echoed deliberately as I walked back toward the kitchen. Rebecca and Scott were still there, loading the dishwasher, their voices now lowered to normal conversation, their faces showing casual inquiry. The expression of someone expecting her father to return from the bathroom, not someone about to face devastating consequences. I heard every single word you just said. I walked back towards the living room, the hum of the refrigerator and the distant clinking of dishes from the kitchen fading behind me. My footsteps, usually light, felt deliberate, almost heavy with purpose. The sweet, cloying aroma of Christmas treats mingled with the faint scent of pine from the towering tree in the corner. Rebecca, Scott, Gerald, and Karen were gathered by the fireplace, a picture of domestic bliss. Sophie, thankfully, was nowhere in sight. She was likely upstairs, lost in the magic of her new doll. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm, flickering glow across their faces as they sipped tea and laughed at some shared anecdote. It was a scene of perfect manufactured harmony, and it made my stomach churn. I approached them, my presence seemingly unnoticed for a moment. Scott was gesturing animatedly, a teacup in his hand, while Rebecca smiled, her head tilted, playing the adoring wife. Gerald and Karen watched them, their expressions fond. "May I have a moment of your time?" I asked, my voice cutting through their light chatter. It was calm, almost unnervingly so, lacking any of the tremor I felt deep inside. Their heads snapped towards me, smiles faltering. Rebecca's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing her face. Scott's jaw tightened. Gerald and Karen, however, looked at me with polite curiosity, sensing a shift in the atmosphere but not yet understanding its cause. "Dad, is everything all right?" Rebecca asked, her voice a little too high, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. "You seem serious." "I am," I replied, stepping closer, positioning myself so I could see all their faces clearly. The colorful gift bags still by the dining table seemed to hum with silent accusation. "There are some things that need to be clarified, things that happened today." Rebecca shot me a desperate, pleading look. "Dad, please, not now. Not in front of Gerald and Karen." "No, Rebecca," I countered, my voice steady, unwavering. "They are family and they deserve to hear this now. The truth." My gaze settled on Gerald, whose brow furrowed slightly, his judicial instincts clearly picking up on the tension. "Gerald, Karen," I began, my voice steady. "You asked earlier about my flight being delayed. Let me tell you what really happened today." Rebecca tried to interrupt again, her hand reaching out as if to physically stop my words. "Dad, please don't. It was just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I cut her off, my eyes fixed on hers. "Or the truth you'd rather not share?" I took a deep breath, the scent of pine and manufactured cheer filling my lungs. "I arrived at Miami International at 12:20 this afternoon. I waited for 3 hours. I called you, Rebecca, 15 times. I tried Scott's phone too. Not a single answer. Not a single call back. No explanation for why I was left alone on Christmas Day." Karen's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. 3 hours? On Christmas Day, Alan?" Her voice was laced with genuine horror. "But the car trouble," Gerald began, his voice laced with confusion, then stopped as he processed the timeline. His legal mind was clearly working through the discrepancies. "Rebecca, you said your car broke down." "There was no car trouble," I stated simply, my gaze sweeping from Rebecca to Scott, who now looked like a deer caught in headlights. 2 working vehicles were in the driveway all day. They deliberately ignored my calls because they hoped I would give up and go home. Gerald stood up, his face darkening with a mixture of anger and profound disappointment. "Rebecca, Scott, this is completely unacceptable. How could you treat Alan this way?" "It was a mistake," Rebecca said desperately, her voice cracking. "We can explain." "A mistake?" Karen's voice carried the moral outrage of someone who'd spent decades teaching young people about ethics. "You left him stranded at an airport on Christmas? Your own father, Rebecca?" I reached for the burgundy gift bag, the one containing the emerald earrings, and pulled out the first envelope. "I came here tonight with Christmas presents, generous ones." The envelope felt substantial in my hands. Official bank letterhead, certified funds, careful planning. This check, I held up Rebecca's envelope, is for $50,000. Scott's contains the same amount. The education fund for Sophie totals $95,000. Rebecca's face went pale, her eyes fixed on the envelope in my hand. Scott swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. A total of $195,000, I continued, my voice gaining a quiet, devastating power. This money, nearly $200,000, was meant as a gift of love, earned over 30 years building Helen's Table from a single storefront into a successful European restaurant in Boston. Scott finally found his voice, a desperate plea. Dad, please, we can fix this. Don't make permanent decisions based on one bad night. I looked at Gerald and Karen, ignoring Scott. While I sat alone at the airport, fearing the worst, you two were here, celebrating. And later, I overheard your conversation. I heard you call my life's work silly stories. I heard you say I embarrass you in front of Gerald and Karen, that I don't know how to behave around people like them. Gerald's face flushed with anger, his eyes blazing at Scott and Rebecca. Scott, Rebecca, I am deeply ashamed of your behavior. This is unconscionable. Karen, tears welling in her eyes, shook her head slowly, unable to speak. And, I continued, my voice cold, decisive. While I was left at the airport, and then cooking alone in an empty house, Rebecca was driving to Orlando to pick you up, Gerald, and buying you a $4,000 watch while shopping. A stark contrast to the $65 tie she gave me. I held up the red tie, then let it drop to the floor. Rebecca's composure finally cracked. No, Dad, you can't. We're your family. Love? I looked at her with cold eyes, the warmth I'd felt for her all my life hardening into something new, something unbreakable. Family doesn't leave one another stranded on Christmas. Family doesn't belittle 30 years of hard work. Family doesn't plot to exclude their own father from future holidays while waiting for him to die. I placed the checks back into my coat pocket, the envelopes feeling lighter now, unburdened by false hope. That money, the $195,000, will now fund my own travels. I looked directly at Rebecca, letting the full weight of my next words sink in. And as for my will, the one that currently designates you, Rebecca, as my sole heir, that will be changed first thing tomorrow. Rebecca gasped, a small choked sound. Scott looked like he'd been struck. Karen reached over and touched my arm gently, her eyes full of genuine sorrow. Alan, we had no idea what you'd endured. This is heartbreaking. Close to $3 million, I said, watching Rebecca's face, watching the realization dawn in her eyes. That's the true cost of this evening for you. Not just the gifts I withheld, but everything else. The room fell silent again, the ticking of Rebecca's expensive clock the only sound. It was a sound that now measured not just time, but the irreversible cost of their betrayal. The cold Miami night air, sharp and clean, cut through me as I stepped out of Rebecca's house. The weight of the gift bags, once heavy with the burden of expectation, was gone, left behind like discarded promises. My single suitcase, now my only companion, felt light in my hand. I left Rebecca and Scott stunned, their faces pale with the dawning realization of what they had lost. Gerald and Karen, their expressions a mixture of shock and profound shame, could offer no words, only a silent, sorrowful gaze that followed me to the curb. I hailed a taxi, my voice steady as I gave the driver the address of the Betsy Hotel on South Beach. It was 11:30 p.m., long past my usual bedtime in Boston, but I felt a strange, quiet clarity. The city lights of Miami blurred into streaks of color as we drove, a vibrant tapestry, but my focus was inward. The Betsy, a classic Art Deco gem, stood in elegant contrast to the modern, almost sterile opulence of Rebecca's home. Its lobby, with its polished wood and literary-themed decor, exuded a quiet sophistication. The doorman, a man with a kind, knowing smile, helped me with my luggage. I approached the reception desk. A young woman with intelligent eyes looked up from her computer. "Welcome to the Betsy. How may I assist you tonight?" "I need a room for an extended stay," I said, my voice carrying a new, firm resolve. "For at least a month, perhaps longer. I need a quiet space." "Certainly, sir. We have excellent long-term rates available, and our oceanfront wing is particularly serene." Her fingers moved efficiently across the keyboard. "Business or leisure?" "Neither, truly," I replied, a faint, genuine smile touching my lips. "I'm simply recalibrating, starting an entirely new chapter in my life." She smiled back, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "How wonderful. Let me find you the perfect retreat." 15 minutes later, I stood in a beautifully appointed suite overlooking the ocean. The room was elegant, filled with the soft glow of lamps, and the distant murmur of the waves was a soothing balm. I set my suitcase on the king-sized bed and walked to the window, pressing my palm against the cool glass. The Miami lights stretched towards the dark expanse of the Atlantic, but my gaze was fixed on the horizon, vast and open. For the first time in years, I was spending money on myself, not as a means to buy affection, but as an investment in my own peace. The antique writing desk, solid mahogany, felt grounding as I settled into its leather chair. I pulled out my wallet and looked at the space where Rebecca's and Scott's checks had been. Empty now, but not with loss, with possibility. Those envelopes were safely in my coat pocket, along with Sophie's education fund. That $95,000 designated for my granddaughter's future remained untouched. My love for Sophie was unconditional, untainted by the greed and calculation I had witnessed tonight. I pictured her gap-toothed grin from the lock screen photo on my phone, a pure, bright reminder of genuine joy. This money would secure her future, a legacy of true love unlike the one Rebecca and Scott had so eagerly anticipated. My phone buzzed. A text message. "Rebecca. Dad, please call. We can work this out." I stared at it for a long moment, the illuminated screen a stark contrast to the quiet resolve in my heart. Then I typed a brief final reply. "No. There is nothing to work out. Goodbye, Rebecca." I hit send, then immediately blocked her number. There would be no more calls, no more texts, no more attempts at manipulation. The hotel telephone sat beside a leather portfolio. I lifted the receiver and dialed the concierge. "Good evening. This is Mr. Whitmore in Suite 704. I'd like to arrange a meeting with a reputable estate lawyer first thing tomorrow morning." "Certainly, Mr. Whitmore. I'll arrange for our premier legal consultant to meet with you at your convenience." "Any particular area of law?" "Estate planning," I clarified, my voice firm. "And I'd also like to speak with someone about European travel packages, the most comprehensive options available with a focus on authentic cultural experiences." "Absolutely, I'll arrange for our travel consultant as well." After hanging up, I walked to the bathroom. Marble counters, heated floors, a soaking tub that could fit 2 people comfortably. The face in the mirror looked different than it had this morning. Tired, yes, but not defeated. The eyes held something new, a quiet satisfaction, a profound sense of liberation. I returned to the desk and opened the portfolio, finding elegant hotel stationery. With the hotel's gold pen, I began making notes not just for travel, but for the new will. Sophie's fund, secure. My travels, my terms. The rest, to charities, to causes that truly make a difference. The clock on the bedside table showed 1:55 a.m. In a few hours, the legal and travel consultants would help me plan a future I'd postponed for decades. A future devoted not to sacrifice, but to rediscovering joy and exploring the world on my own terms. I leaned back in the chair and looked out at the city lights, feeling truly free for the first time in years. The aroma of Helen's Table, my old European restaurant, briefly wafted through my memory. A symbol of my past dedication, now echoing a future of personal fulfillment. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.